Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Truckers Podcast, FYI Conversations Without Barriers. I'm your host, Doug from Ontario, Canada. Hope everybody had a good week. Yes, it is Monday, the 5th of May at 2 p.m. Yeah, I was going to be out here this morning, but it just didn't work out that way. So I'll just get a show in this afternoon. Now, as you may or may not know, um, Trump is just passionate about tariffs. It's his favorite word in the dictionary. He's also somewhat passionate about annexing Canada. Again, he's back in the news. Yesterday, Prime Minister Mark Carney is going to Washington tomorrow to meet with Trump and his cronies at the White House. And again, he's talking about Canada to become the 51st state, which is never going to happen. I don't think he understands the word sovereignty. Canada is a sovereign nation. It is a free nation. It has a diversified population of many different people from around the world come here and make Canada their home. Our Indigenous people. Canada doesn't, or Trump doesn't understand or know anything about Canada. Nothing. And especially when it comes to the Indigenous people of Canada and their treaty rights. Canada has 11 numbered treaties signed between 1871 and 1921. And these treaties were agreements between the Crown and the Indigenous nations covering vast regions across the country. They were meant to facilitate settlement and resource extraction while promising varying rights and benefits to Indigenous peoples. Beyond the numbered treaties, there are also modern treaties and historic agreements that continue to shape Indigenous ground relationships. And Canada has a long history of treaties with Indigenous people, each carrying significant meaning, and here are a few ones. The Royal Proclamation of 1763 established protocols for land acquisition and recognized Indigenous land rights, shaping future treaty making. The numbered treaties from 1871 and 1921, the James Bay and Northern Quebec Agreement, 1975, the Nisga's Treaty in 2000, and the modern treaties of Canada are agreements negotiated between Indigenous nations and the Crown to clarify land rights. Governance, and resource management. Since 1975, Canada has signed 26 modern treaties, with 18 of them including self-government provisions. Donald Trump doesn't give a shit about that. We here in Canada do. What do you think he would do with those treaties? He'd just tear them up, wouldn't recognize them, pillage the land. See, Trump doesn't... Trump said he doesn't need our oil and gas and timber and aluminum and steel and other minerals that the United States refineries and companies buy from Canada because you need them. So he doesn't want companies and refineries and stuff like that to pay for these resources that we have here in Canada. He just wants to take them over, which again, by the way, will never happen. I don't think Donald Trump understands, how the world works, particularly economically. He doesn't understand how the world works. He still claims that he's subsidizing Canada in the tune of 200 billion, 250 billion, which is entirely false. He's not subsidizing Canada. We have a trade deficit with the United States, and it's probably around $55 billion. So he doesn't know what he's talking about. In his little pea brain, I don't even know how he even fits these numbers in this little pea brain. I have no idea. And then he comes up with this idea of putting 100% tariffs on films produced outside the United States. And this was his recent announcement. And it has sparked confusion and concern across global film industries. His reasoning is that foreign governments are offering incentives to lure filmmakers away from the United States, which he claims is causing the American movie industry to die at a very fast death, he says. Well, however, many industry experts argue that this move fails to account for the complexities of modern filmmaking, where production often spans multiple countries for financial and creative reasons. And for an example, major Hollywood films like Mission Impossible, Avatar, and Batman are shot across various locations worldwide. The British film industry, which has been a key partner for Hollywood productions, is particularly alarmed by the potential impacts of these tariffs. And the critics also say that the policies lacks clarity, and it's unclear whether it applies to U.S. companies filming abroad, foreign films distributed in the United States, or streaming content. And also many in the industry believe that this move could backfire, making America's films more expensive and limiting international collaboration. Some even argue that it reflects a misunderstanding of how the global film industry operates, just like Donald Trump doesn't understand how the rest of the world operates. Never mind the film industry. And there's definitely a lot of criticism surrounding Trump's decision to impose 100% tariffs on films produced outside the United States, with many arguing that it demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of how the global economy and creative industries function. So I'm not wrong about that. Film production isn't just a national enterprise. It relies on international partnerships, diverse film locations, and collaborations across borders. Even major Hollywood productions often shoot scenes abroad, take advantage of foreign tax incentives, and work with international talent. What, he thinks he's going to bring back the movie industry back to the United States and just have American actors doing the movies? That's just absurd. Absolutely absurd. Beyond the film industry, this kind of protectionist approach, just with those other tariffs on other countries around the world, it's a protectionist approach, raises concerns about broader economic consequences. If Trump continues imposing aggressive tariffs, it could trigger retaliation from other nations, which we are already doing in implementing tariffs on the United States. That could trigger retaliation from other nations, like I said, potentially affecting trade, and it already is, and affecting investment and diplomatic relations, which it already is. Some critics argue that these policies isolate the United States from the rest of the world rather than strengthening its industries. And Donald Trump is isolating the United States from the rest of the world. Canada is boycotting the United States on even on travel. We're not traveling to the United States. We're not going across border shopping. We're buying Canadian produce, Canadian whatever Canadian products we find, we're buying it. And we'll buy from other nations and not the United States. Then we had the former mayor of Toronto pointing out that the lack of clarity around the policy makes it even more problematic. How would this tariff be applied to co-production, streaming platforms, or distribution rights? It's also worth noting that Canada plays a huge role in Hollywood. Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal are major production hubs for US-based films, meaning that this policy could be a severe impact on Hollywood North as well. It'll be interesting to see whether this tariff sticks or whether economic or industry pressure forces a reversal. I think the tariffs are doomed to fail, and rightly so. And based on what the industry experts and politicians like John Tory are saying, these tariffs seem incredibly short-sighted. It's like everything else Donald Trump does in the White House is all short-sighted and impractical. The global film industry is deeply interconnected, and trying to impose 100% tariffs on production outside the US could cripple Hollywood's ability to operate efficiently or any else in the world. Another major concern is that many US films rely on foreign locations, crews, and post-production services. Again, with Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal are prime examples of cities that have been key to American productions for decades. And the film industry doesn't work in isolation. And this tariff risk alienating international partners while driving up costs for the U.S. productions. Then there's the issue of how the tariffs would even be enforced. And it's unclear what qualifies as a foreign film. Would apply to co-production streaming platforms, U.S. companies filming abroad. The lack of clarity could lead to chaos, lawsuits, and industry-wide uncertainty. And overall, many critics argue that this policy is doomed to fail. If implemented, it may harm Hollywood more than it helps, making films more expensive and harder to produce, and ultimately weaken the very industry Trump claims he's trying to protect. Thank you for joining me this afternoon. I'm your host, Doug, from Ontario, Canada. Just discussing, tariffs. Donald Trump's come up with a new tariff plan, placing 100% tariffs on the film industry. Of course, he's got tariffs all around the world, especially their closest trading partner here in Canada. And again, mentioning that, Canada as the 51st state, yesterday, again, our Prime Minister, Mark Carney, is going to Washington tomorrow to have a meeting with Trump and his cronies. Talked a little bit about this, he annexing Canada, claiming he doesn't need our lumber, our oil, our gas, our steel, our aluminum, other precious minerals that industries in the United States purchase. I don't think he even understands the meaning of sovereignty. Canada is a sovereign nation. We are a free nation. We are a diverse in culture nation. Our Indigenous people of Canada and their treaty rights. Trump knows nothing about Canada. Nothing whatsoever. Now, of course, he's imposed tariffs on many countries around the world. He's backed down on some, paused some, and recently, removed tariffs off of auto parts going back and forth between Canada and the United States. So he's all over the board. Now, one of his biggest threats is this 100% tariffs on the film industry. And like I said before he came on the show, I don't even think Donald Trump even knows how the world works, economically or otherwise. And we have the industry experts are saying that, them thinking about imposing the 100% tariffs on the film industry, is short-sighted and impractical. And that the film industry is deeply interconnected. Foreign industry, like foreign movies, international movies, American, Canadian, and that the U.S. film industry relies on foreign locations and crews and post-production services. Like major Hollywood films like Mission Impossible, Avatar, and Batman are shot across various locations worldwide. And the industries, the professionals that work in the industries are calling it short-sighted. Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal are major production hubs for the United States-based films, meaning this policy could have a severe impact on Hollywood North here in Canada. And the industry, like I said, the industry experts are calling this incredibly short-sighted and impractical, and that it is deeply interconnected. And trying to impose 100% tariffs on production outside the United States could cripple Hollywood's ability to operate efficiently. Another major concern is that many U.S. films rely on foreign locations, crews, and post-production services. Again, Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal are prime examples of cities have been key to American productions for decades. And the film industry doesn't work in isolation. And the tariffs risk alienating international partners while driving up costs for the United States productions. Then there's the issue of how the tariffs would even be enforced. And it's unclear what qualifies as a foreign film. Would it apply to co-production, streaming platforms, U.S. companies filming abroad? Then the lack of clarity could lead to chaos, lawsuits, and industry-wide uncertainty. Many of the people who work in this profession argue this policy is doomed to fail. And if it is implemented, it may harm Hollywood more than it helps, making films more expensive and harder to produce. and ultimately weaken the very industry Trump claims he's trying to protect. You see, the film industries can't afford to wait and see, and it will mobilize immediately to counteract, the potential fallout from Trump's 100% tariffs on foreign films. The former mayor of Toronto pointed out that this policy could threaten, like, we got 40,000 jobs here in Canada alone that work in this industry. Imagine how many people you have in the industry working in the United States and other parts around the world, like Europe. Studios, filmmakers, and industry leaders will likely pressure the United States government. Hollywood has immense political influence on major studios. They could lobby Congress to block or revise the tariff. The fine loopholes, if enforced, remains unclear. U.S. productions may rebrand international shoots as domestic or rely on co-productions to sidestep restrictions. It'll strengthen the international collaborations. Countries like Canada, the United Kingdom, and Australia could use this moment to boost their own industries, making them less reliant on the United States. And what Canada is doing, even right now, I talked about this the other day with the interprovincial trade here right across Canada. Is freeing up those boundaries, and we trade with each other as one. And of course, our energy and our other fuels and fossils or minerals that we use, we are in our clean energy and stuff like that. We are making progress with parts of Asia and Europe in trade and lessening our reliance on the United States. And we could certainly do that here with the film industry. And of course, rally public opposition. The tariff affects movie prices, streaming services, and global box office revenues. And public backlash could sway policymakers. They see the film industry is already mobilizing, and rightly so. And as the former Toronto Mayor John Tory pointed out, studio filmmakers and policymakers will likely move fast to challenge this policy, whether through lobbying, finding legal loopholes, or simply pushing for a reversal before the damage takes hold. What's interesting is the timing. See, Trump announced this just before the Canadian leaders were set to meet with him tomorrow, which suggests he's using it as leverage in trade negotiations, if nothing else. Well, there's really not going to be much trade negotiations going on too much because the Canada, United States, Mexico agreement doesn't come up for renewal until next year. This controversy might force Hollywood to rethink its global strategy and strengthen ties with non-US markets. Canada has the resources, influence to both strengthen its own film industry and push back against the United States tariffs. Expanding Canadian filmmaking. This could be a golden opportunity for Canada to attract more productions, offer competitive tax incentives, and invest in local talent. Cities like Toronto, Vancouver are already Hollywood hotspots. So doubling down on their appeal could make them even more vital to global filmmaking. Diplomatic pressure. Canada's government could use its trade relations and the Hollywood connections to challenge the tariffs directly. If enough industry leaders speak out, it could put pressure on the United States lawmakers to rethink the policy. Then it makes perfect sense, and with the diplomatic pressure should be the first move to try to reverse these tariffs before they cause too much damage. And we do have ties. We do have whatever trade ties left that we have with the United States. And moving away from reliance on the United States because, you know, Canada's not pissed off at the American people. Like, Canadians, Americans, you have family and friends on both sides of the border, right? And it's unfortunately that we're boycotting the United States through travel, essentially, too. Shopping on the other side of the border cities, like Sarnia to Port Huron, Michigan, Windsor, the Detroit corridor, Niagara to Buffalo, and other stops in between. We're just simply, people go over there even, when the gas was high here, it was still a little bit cheaper to buy it in the United States, so they go shopping in the United States and fill up their tanks. We're not even doing that. Now, if the diplomacy doesn't work, then industry expansion could be the backup plan. Strengthening Canada's film industry will not only help mitigate losses, but could also make Canada more independent from Hollywood's influences. Doubling down on tax incentives, production infrastructure, and international partnership could turn this into a long-term growth opportunity. See, the other thing about tariffs too, because it just gives other nations other opportunities, other trading partners. And Canada is doing just that. Other countries are doing just that. If Canada plays this right, it could come out even stronger, whether the tariffs stay or go. And of course, talking about diversity, it's key. The film industry, especially in Canada, expand into new markets, develop a stronger local production, and tap into different revenue streams to stay competitive. Boosting the local production, investing in Canadian filmmakers, studios, and talent could make Canada less reliant on Hollywood. And we have a lot of Canadian talent, and we've had a lot of Canadian talent grow through the movie industry. And of course, again, partnering with other global markets. And we already have strong ties with the United Kingdom, Australia, and Europe. Strengthening these partnerships could reduce dependence on the United States. And we're doing that with other trade between UK, Australia, Europe, Asia. And exploring new distribution models with tariffs potentially impacting traditional releases, studios might lean more on streaming platforms. international co-productions or alternative funding sources. So I guess there goes going out to the movies, right? Everybody likes to go see movies every now and again. I sure do. I don't want to see that breakdown. I don't want to fucking stream it. Developing other incentives like the tax breaks and grants for local production could attract filmmakers to stay in Canada. And if done strategically, diversification could actually make Canada's film industry stronger regardless of what happens with the tariffs. And of course, like I said, by collaborating more with the UK, Australia, Europe, and other major film markets, co-produce more films with global studios, ensuring projects remain competitive despite the tariffs. The other initiatives for international films to work in Canada, making it even more appealing, make it a more appealing production hub. Create distribution agreements with streaming services, allow Canadian films to reach a broader audience. Leverage shared resources like film crews, post-production facilities, and financing options across existing partnerships. With Hollywood facing tariff challenges, Canada could emerge stronger by doubling down on its own role as a key player in international filmmaking. Whether it's a blockbuster, action films, intimate indie dramas, or big budget sci-fis, Canada has the talent, infrastructure, and location to support any type of storytelling. Toronto can double as New York. Vancouver is a favorite for fantasy and sci-fi, and cities like Montreal and Calgary bring their own unique cinematic appeal. They've even shot movies here in London, Ontario, where I reside. And with the global reach, Canada could become even more a powerhouse in film, no matter how the US tariffs play out. Just, I don't know, ladies and gentlemen, it's just absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Interested to see how these talks are going to go tomorrow at the White House. And believe me, it's not going to be this fucking theoretical nightmare that you saw um, with Lewinsky and J.D. Vance and Trump. It's not going to play out like that, ladies and gentlemen. Prime Minister Mark Carney is one of the um, most recognized and appreciated and well liked economists in the world, and he's Prime Minister. Governor of the Bank of Canada, governor of the Bank of England, dedicated his whole life to economics, where Donald Trump doesn't even know what the hell he's talking about. Doesn't understand economics, doesn't understand one-on-one economics. I mean, he tells you that, he places the tariffs on the country. It's the country that pays that tariff. Well, he simply doesn't understand one-on-one economics, because it's the importer, which would be the importers from the United States buying from Canada. They pay that tax and they pass that tax on to Americans people. And vice versa. If we put tariffs on the United States, which we have, the United States doesn't pay that tariff. The importers from Canada pay that tariff, and it gets passed on to the consumers here in Canada. That's one-on-one economics. It's not hard to figure out. All the bureaucratic bullshit that comes out of his mouth is just unbelievable. Anyways, thank you for joining me this afternoon. I was gonna do a show this morning, but that just didn't happen. So I thought I'd come out and talk about this. So enjoy the rest of your Monday and the rest of your week, because now I won't be out here. I'm not going to be back out here until Sunday, this coming Sunday. I don't even know what that date is. It's that's hilarious. The 11th, Mother's Day too. But it'll be in the morning, 8:30 in the morning, because I will be going to visit my mother. I visit my mother anyways, but not just on Mother's Day, obviously. But May the 11th at 8:30 Sunday will be the next time we'll be out here. So thanks for coming out here and listening in. I'm your host, Doug from Ontario, Canada. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy the rest of your week.